I love Centurions. They are my favorite model in the entire 40k range. I love the way they look. I love the units they represent on the tabletop. I love painting them. I mostly love building them, and they have a special place in my heart as one of the driving forces behind my Warhammer journey, my homebrew Space Marine chapter, and even the success of this channel. Whether you've been following this channel for a while, or this is your first video of mine that you're watching, or you've been wondering who the hell this Paul guy is that everyone keeps going on about whenever Centurions are mentioned, you might think that this is a joke, that my Love Centurions is just some bit that I'm playing up for internet clout. Nope. My genuine opinion is that Centurions, these goofy, armor on top of armored walking bricks with nipple missiles and giant gun fists that nobody liked when they were released, are my absolute favorite thing in the entirety of 40k. Okay, maybe I'm playing some of it up for internet clout. If I wasn't making videos, I probably wouldn't be playing 18 Centurions in tournaments regularly. I'd be doing something else, like regretting my pile of shame, or finding a job. But still, I recently made a video about my dislike for Imperial Guard and trying to work out why I had that opinion. It didn't go well. So instead, let's talk about something I like, and what would be more appropriate for my 100th video than talking about my beloved Centurions. Don't listen to YouTube. It considers stream VODs as videos, and also ignore any unlisted videos for stuff like paint job announcements and whatever. But look, this is my 100th video, okay? I planned this meticulously to make sure it was 100. I just want to talk about Centurions more, damn it. Let me talk about Centurions. I'm going to go through my history with the Centurions, what I love about them in all aspects of the hobby, what they mean to me, what I'm going to do with the Games Workshop if they send them to Legends, and finally answer the questions that I think everyone is asking, like, are you okay? What's wrong with you? And why are you like this? The answers to those last three questions are, I'm fine, plenty, and back when I got into the hobby again in 2021, after not having really had any interaction with 40k since I was a kid, I started off by collecting Drukhari. I remembered Dark Eldar from the 3rd edition starter box my brother got, and thought they were very silly looking and not really that cool, but seeing their absolute glow up convinced me to pick up the Combat Patrol and ensure that my wallet would never be the same again. This was in 9th edition, just around the same time that Drukhari Codex was released, so it seemed like perfect timing if I wanted to get back into the game. I'd have a new army that was an unusual choice for me, having only really played Space Marines as a child, and not just Space Marines, Ultramarines. And I say played, I never really played much of the game, and mostly painted the blue because that's what the box art was. But anyway, it was something different for me, and they'd come with the freshest new rules, so they'd be nice and updated, have all these fancy cool new tricks. Turns out that the 9th edition Drukhari Codex when it was released was one of the most busted and absurdly powerful armies ever. Unfortunately, I never got much of an opportunity to exploit that, as I didn't play that many games, and I was still kind of learning it anyway. But hey, I still had fun with some of those insane combos in there, like the Blender Bus or the Triptych Whip Succubus. I went back to look and see if I could remember some of the other wild combinations of that book, but 9th edition was a lot. After getting my first Combat Patrol, I did what any respectable person with ADHD does when they have a new hyperfocus. I dived headfirst into the deep end. I went in hard, building up a hefty collection that to this day is pretty much still mostly unpainted. Yes, I'm one of those people. And yes, I will also make content taking the piss out of you for doing the exact same thing. That's called streamer privilege, and I will abuse it to the maximum extent I can. Whilst I was purchasing far too many Dark Eldar, I decided to have a look at some other armies to see what they looked like. I wasn't looking at getting another army, but if the Incubi of my youth and the Incubi of today had such a massive improvement, what else has improved? I had a look at Space Marines, the army I'd collected as a young'un. I have a fairly vivid memory of going to a games day, maybe 2004-ish, in my early teenage years, around the time of 4th edition. There were some awesome new models coming out that I'd managed to pick up, like the Command Squad with this awesome Grey Knight-esque helmet. So surely in the intervening years, things had improved. Well, they had. There were a lot of awesome new models, characters, vehicles, the old Boxnauts replaced with these amazing Redemptor Dreadnoughts, just a plethora of awesome new minis. As I was scrolling through the website, back when the website was actually good, seriously GW, bring back this paint guy thing, it was really useful. Something caught my eye. I did a double take and scrolled back up and stared in wonderment at what I'd seen. There it was. The best thing ever created. The Centurion. Damn, I've thought to myself, no wonder 40k is getting so popular these days when they're releasing absolute peak models like this. The improvements on the Incubi since my youth were impressive, but this was staggering. This was the pinnacle of design. The giant drill fists, the arm-mounted las cannons, tasteful thickness of it. Oh my god. It even has a nipple cannon. When I saw these, it didn't even cross my mind that this model could be in any way controversial or disliked, and I assumed everyone else would agree without a shadow of a doubt that this was incredible. So in my continued attempt to speedrun emptying my bank account with as many Drukhari as possible, I also picked up a box of Centurions. I had no idea what I was going to do with them, and I had no real desire to collect a Space Marine army. Even though now I have over 3,000 points of painted Screaming Ravens, back then I did actually have the opinion that Space Marines, being the default option that everyone does, would be boring. I'd done it before as a kid, and I wanted to explore new things. 1,000 Suns 9th edition release box was coming up soon, and I'd always loved their design, so getting them would be far cooler than regular old Space Marines. I did really like their design though. Something I again didn't realize was the controversy of the Primaris Marines. I'm not much into the lore about the whole Primarisification-y thing, and I just like the new proportions, and the modern helmet design is really cool. I love the classic angry face grill helmets, but they do feel a little bit dated to me, and regardless, neither of the helmets come close to the Beaky Boy anyway. So they arrived, and I built them alongside the Drukhari stuff I'd bought, and wow, they look even more incredible in person. Look at these guys. They're huge. I went with the Drill Fist plus Melter option because why wouldn't you? And then I put them in a really useful storage box and didn't think about them again. The only reason I put them in a really useful storage box was because at the time, I didn't have a tabletop stronghold Magcase 2.0. Yeehaw! That's right. Did you really think that just because it's my 100th video, you would be safe from the sponsor time? Tabletop stronghold creates strong MDF terrain and mini cases like the Magcase 2.0, the sturdiest and safest way to store and transport your minis with its adjustable trays and the power of magnets. Magcase 2.0 can hold 18 Centurions on a single tray and is designed to be magnets. And it's an excellent way to display your magnets with this secure window. You can magnets up to 25% off using Paul 25, and there's magnets to the USA, Canada, UK, Australia, magnets, New Zealand, and most of the EU. So magnets. Tabletop Stronghold for magnets. Go to tabletopstronghold.com or magnets. In my This is how piles of shame accumulate. It's that immediate reaction of, oh, that's cool, I have, or will have, an idea of what to do with those, followed by a complete lack of not following through on that idea, because coming up with ideas is a whole lot easier than actually implementing them. Any software engineer that has had a conversation with a designer knows this far too intimately. Having now built 18 Centurions, I have the authority to tell you that they are absolutely one of the models of all time. Assembling Centurions isn't difficult, really. In fact, it's one of the easier and more pleasant experiences, I feel. They have a lot of nice chunky panels, a lot of mold lines are hidden behind the extra armor, and there's a lot of nice options. The poses are a little static, which is probably going to cause me a whole lot of anguish when it comes to making my Screaming Rivers Chapter Master and having to do a lot of conversion work, and there is one finicky part, and it's getting these pipes to connect from the weapon to the back. These pieces come in two parts, and they're fine to put together, that's not really the issue, but you do have to make sure that they are correctly placed and don't slip around when connecting them from the gun to the back. And they twist around a fair bit, so it can be a bit tedious to get them right. Also, you have to make sure that they are the correct cable because they are all associated with a specific arm, so it does slow things down a bit. Most annoying thing about them, though, is that for some reason, one of the models has the cable all together as one piece. This bothers me, mostly because why are you making me put all of the others together as two pieces when you've shown you can mold them as one? Just do that for all of them, Games Workshop. Also, one of the other issues is other helmets from other kits are very slightly smaller. So when I wanted to add a beaky helmet to my captain, it does sink in a little bit further, making it look like he's resting his beak on the front rim of this armor piece. But at least there are helmet options for all the models, because good lord, the helmetless option looks daft. And you know it must look silly because that's coming from someone like me who thinks Desolators are good. The general consensus on Centurions is that they are very silly. They are armor on top of armor, they're too wide, they look like they'd waddle, and they do with that 4-inch movement. The poses are very static, they look too short, and whilst I understand all of those points, to me, they straddle that perfect line between awesome and goofy. Yes, they are a bit silly, they're over the top, but so is 40k. 40k is this grimdark world of galactic nightmares and horrors beyond our understanding. But it is also very silly. 60-million-year-old soulless metal husks waking up from a deep sleep to claim the galaxy whilst arguing for centuries about whether a shiny bauble belongs in a museum. Football hooligan fungus that screams, "Wah!" Drive around in dragsters made from Scrap Heap Challenge and shoot you with a janky scrap gun that teleports a grot directly into your underwear. An army of armored nuns that Father, Son, and Holy Spirit bomb you out of existence with a literal pipe organ on a tank. And a futuristic armed force that hasn't had any tank improvement design since the release of Shrek. All of these things exist in the 41st millennium. So I'm sure someone, somewhere, who wanted to create weapons and armor for a futuristic force of super elite super soldiers at some point may have thought, hey, you know when you were a kid and you played Age of Empires and you'd build a wall around your base and then build another wall around that to give your enemy more stuff to have to fight through, to give you more time to try and rally your army just before typing how do you turn this on to get that sweet car unit? Why not do that, but for us? I don't know what all that other stuff was, but an exosuit with big guns would be cool and probably useful. I think people like the idea of Centurions, but they aren't enthused by the execution. To me, they're perfect, but a lot of people have tried to redesign them or fix them to better fit their idea of what these things should be and should look like. I've had a lot of comments over the years about Eons of Battle's updated Centurions, and yeah, They're really good. I've watched this video a couple of times now and went back again to watch it recently for this video, but there was always something about this design that didn't sit right with me. It didn't feel correct. It didn't feel like a Centurion, and watching it again, I finally worked out why. By making the proportions better, what these are supersized Space Marines. You can imagine the wearer of the armor getting out and just being that tall, that wide. They're massive dudes, even for Space Marines, given a battlesuit befitting of their stature. The original Centurions are engulfed in that suit. The frame comes halfway up their helmet. It looks as though this armor was not made to fit anyone. It was made as a machine to be piloted. So someone has to step up and into this thing, and that inside there is a regular Marine that can get back out. I can imagine the Centurion armor empty, ready for someone to get into it. Jay's redesign is fantastic, but with the changes, it just feels like a scaled up Marine. Does it seem like these parts in the leg frame, for example, are there to give the actual pilot a leg up? It just feels and looks like it's part of the armor for stability. In my opinion, by making the proportions more correct, it actually takes away a little bit of that Centurion magic. Now, if Games Workshop were to release a Primaris version of the Centurion in the future, and they did look closer to this version, I wouldn't complain, because these are still fucking awesome. But let me know in the comments if you understand where I'm coming from with this. So there my Centurions sat patiently whilst I continued discovering 40k through my Drukhari and Thousand Suns. I looked up the rules for Centurions, and they seemed cool, but I didn't really have many thoughts about how I'd use them. I had other things to think about, like how many different Archons and Succubi kit bashes I can make, and how the hell I was going to paint the Mutant Vortex piece I just bought on a whim, because it just looked so goddamn cool. But eventually, I started to think about a theoretical Space Marine army that would best utilize the Centurions in the most ridiculous way possible. It was an idle thought, something to ponder and have a quick look into during a spare moment to see if I could come up with an interesting army list that was potentially a bit out of left field for a normal Space Marine force. At the time, I wasn't aware that this line of inquiry would lead me to this point. This video's existence is at the end of a domino effect started from that seemingly inconsequential spark. Annoyed and depressed by yet another hobby that I'd hyper-focused and overcommitted to, I decided to create a YouTube channel to document my journey in these hobby ventures. I'd suddenly pick up and drop hobbies all the time, doing nothing except focusing on that thing before moving on just as quickly when I hit any sort of strenuous hurdle. And I thought that at least with this channel, I could make a video, another hobby, and I'd at least get something out of it in the form of that video. So I started with Warhammer. I had no real thoughts about where this would go, and in all honesty, I probably would have dropped the idea if had it not gained traction. Another hobby unfulfilled at the first sign of adversity, but it started to gain some interest. About 6 months into the channel's life, I hadn't got much done for potential content, hadn't played any games or painted any models, so I thought about that silly army idea I'd had. I'd actually made some progress on it, and by made some progress, I mean I'd bought some stuff and had a great idea, but so far done nothing actually tangible. I'd mentioned this army in passing a couple of times in previous videos, so why not make a quick video explaining the idea? When I looked at the rules for 9th edition Space Marines, I knew I didn't want to play Ultramarines. I played them as a kid, they're the default. I wanted to try something different. I didn't know much about Raven Guard, and still really don't, but I like birds, and I like their style. And I remember when I was younger, looking at Shrike's model with the jump pack and the lightning claws, and absolutely loving that vibe. Exploring and looking through all the rules, I found that you could do all sorts of stuff to make Centurions, these hulking, waddling masses of gunfire and metal, stealthy. They could be infiltrated, they could scout, and have all these weird movement tricks that just seemed hilarious to me. But how would that work? Well, if everything is ridiculously loud, then any noise will be drowned out. That counts as stealth. Thus, the Screaming Ravens were born. Loud, flashy, fast, and totally original, in no way to be confused with Emperor's Children, Alpha Legion, Blood Angels, or White Scars. Or World Eaters, or Harlequins, Space Wolves, Orcs. Okay, they're not the most original thing in the world, right? But still, the ideas came pouring out of my brain and right into my basket as I purchased a bunch of stuff to support this army. I didn't even think I'd ever play it, but the idea of having an F-Zero-X themed jump pack unit was something I just could make and have something cool without ever needing to actually put them on the table. Progress was slow to non-existent, but hey, the idea is there, so might as well talk about it, right? People probably aren't that interested, but it's a fun little project and I need a video, so let's just make something. It's not really an exaggeration to say that the purchase of those Centurions is the reason for my YouTube success. I'm not going to go full Imperial Guard, Crablock's existential crisis here, but it's funny to think that these silly models were the catalyst that allowed me to crawl out of one of the lowest points in my life, losing my job, my 11-year-long career, and give me the chance to realize my dream. A dream that stands on shaky ground, sure, and a dream that could end at any time, but a chance. A dream that you can keep going by subscribing or supporting on Patreon. From there, work on the army continued in the background, but it still wasn't an army I was playing. 10th edition came around, and with it, the Raven Guard rules I'd planned to use were removed. But in their place, new rules that seemed just as exciting and fitting. And Centurions themselves had awesome data sheets. When my friends and I decided to start Crusade, I knew what I had to do. The Screaming Ravens would finally take flight, and my Centurions, of which I now had 6, would finally get a chance to shine. I lost basically every game because I was too silly. Turns out overextending turn 1 every single game doesn't work, and I never really learnt because I can't help myself from seeing blood in the water and going full berserk mode. Maybe World Eaters would have been a better choice. But the one thing that was a constant positive in every game of that Crusade was the Centurions. First, the 6 Assault Centurions, who could rapid ingress and clean up anything that they looked at, or hop into a Storm Raven and elbow drop onto an unsuspecting monster for maximum damage. And then later, 6 Devastating Centurions, who, using the Vanguard Spearhead rules, could appear anywhere that they could get a line of sight on their target and literally delete anything in the game. The points may have changed over the lifetime of 10th edition, but the datasheets have remained the same. Devastating Centurions have seen a lot of play competitively by cowards who use Euro of Interest, but the Assault Centurions are also amazing, and I don't know why people aren't using them. I mean, I guess looking at my results in game, I can understand why they might not be used, but their datasheet seems really good, so I'm sure someone smarter than me could put them to good use. I know a lot of my viewers don't really play 40k, so I'll try and make this as easy to follow and understand and explain the Centurions in a way that will make some sense. Both Assault and Devastating Centurions have the same basic profile. They move 4 inches. In 40k terms, this is commonly referred to as slow. A basic Marine for context goes 6 inches, and a jump pack unit goes 12 inches. Vehicles Dreadnoughts are usually in the 8 to 12 inch range, and the board is 44 by 60 inches. So it'd take a Centurion 10 turns just to go the width of the entire board. That's not great. Trying to get these into position to shoot or move up the board to get into melee is an absolute chore. This is their biggest weakness, but fortunately there are a lot of ways to mitigate it. As I've been told many times by, it's not the size, it's how you use it. Centurions could ride in a variety of transports, including the hypermobile but devastatingly unwieldy Storm Raven, Land Raiders, and Repulsors. Detachment rules can give them more movement options as well. I personally am a fan of Vanguard Spearhead, as I've said before, to basically just not walk anywhere and teleport around the board. You can grant your range weapons the Assault keyword, giving you the ability to move D6 plus 4 inches and still shoot, or Advance and Charge, allowing you to move that D6 plus 4 inches to get into range for a more reasonable chance of making a 2d6 charge, or a plethora of other options. So the weakest stat of the Centurion also has the easiest and most potential fixes. They are toughness 7, which is an excellent breakpoint to get to. The roll you need to wound a unit is based on this simple calculation, and most of the anti-tank big guns cap out around strength 12, things like las cannons, dart lancers, and so on. Meaning by default, you are more safe from these big hits, and things like plasma will need to be overcharged if they don't want to be wounding on 4s. A 2+ save means that you'll need to get at least AP 5 to not give the Centurions any save at all, and even in the open, a last cannon still gives them a 5-up save, which can be improved very easily. There's no invulnerable save, but that really isn't needed with the abundance of cover and other ways to lower the AP of the incoming shots. 4 wounds is also a very nice stat to have. There are a lot of powerful weapons that are damage 3, and that means you have to get at least 2 of those through to kill a single Centurion. And the way normal damage works for 40k means there's no overflow. Centurion has 1 wound remaining and takes 3 damage. The Centurion dies, but the other 2 damage doesn't go onto the next model in the unit. It's just lost. Leadership 6+, that's standard Space Marine leadership, but somehow for me, I fail 50% of my leadership tests because my dice like to laugh at my suffering. And OC2, which is nice, but not super important, as the model count is fairly low. Most battle line units, i.e. basic infantry units in most armies like Intercessors or Cadian Shock Troopers, are OC2 and in greater numbers, but it's still not something to underestimate. You can easily tip a weakly defended objective with just 3 Centurions, and they're tough to get rid of. These units are slow, tough bruisers that require some real focus to get rid of, which can redirect fire from your other units. But if they were just tanks that weather your assault, you could just ignore them and focus your efforts elsewhere, but Centurions are nasty damage dealers as well. They're the Lich King from that one Wrath of the Lich King dungeon that no one really remembers the start of, where the Lich King slowly walks after you, and if he reaches you, die. I wonder how many people get that reference to World of Warcraft Classic versus when it was originally released. Assault Centurions have Centurion Hurricane Bolters and either Twin Flamers or Twin Melter Guns. With the Flamers, at short range, they can shred weaker enemies through weight of dice and are a nice Overwatch threat. With the Melters, they do less of that weight of fire, but have a very deadly AP -4 D6 plus 2 damage weapon that can decimate tougher elite units, and with a little bit of help for stuff like Oath of Moments, can even do well into the toughest of tanks. And all of these options are twinlings, giving you a reroll to the wound, making them even more likely to get their damage through on any target. But where Assault Centurions really shine is in their melee. If 3 of these things get into melee with a monster or vehicle, you might as well remove it from the table. I've one-shot knights easily with these things. 3 attacks each, but against monsters and vehicles, they're sustained hits too. That means every unmodified 6 adds another 2 additional successful hits. These are strength 10, AP -2, and damage 3. Oh, and they're twin-linked because they have 2 fists, so obviously they get 2 chances to smack you in the face with their literal rock-crushing murder drills. You can do some serious damage with these things, and you shouldn't get too focused on their monster and vehicle annihilating abilities. Even without the sustained hits, imagine these things into Terminator-type units or other elite infantry. Sure, there are things that will kill them in melee. You should avoid stuff like 8-bound, but they have such a wide pool of good targets, and you can specialize them towards horde clearing shooting or double down on that elite tank busting. Whilst the Assault Centurions are extremely powerful, the Devastating Centurions are somehow even more deadly. 6 Devastating Centurions are, in my mind, the best damaging unit in the entire Space Marine Codex, potentially the entire game. Without any outside buffs, they are absurdly strong, but with buffs, they are just completely off the rails busted. And yes, even with this supposedly broken unit, I still can't win any games. I have 12 of these, and for some reason, I still keep losing. I blame my dice. Or my opponent for cheating somehow, or it's GW's fault for some reason. I'm sure they've done something wrong. Anyway, you get a lot of weapon choices here. You can have heavy bolters, grav cannons, or the objectively coolest and correct choice, las cannons, as well as either the same Centurion bolters as the Assault Centurions or Centurion missile launchers. Now, the las cannons are great just because lance cannons are great anti-tank weapons. One of the higher strengths in the game at strength 12, AP 3, and D6 plus 1 damage. So that means it's at least 2 damage, or in my case, always 2 damage because my dice are awful. And twin linked for that extra chance to get the damage through. But whilst the lance cannons are good, my god are the Centurion missile launchers absolutely insane. They're not twin linked, but they are blast. Blast gives you an extra attack for every 5 models in the target unit. So against a unit of 10 models, that's D3 plus 2 shot per Centurion. Squad of 6 gets 63 plus 12 shots on a strength 9 AP2 damage D3 weapon. Against basically any big squad of infantry, you're wounding on 2s. Maybe on 3s against something like orcs, but then orcs aren't likely to get a saving throw. Not only are Devastating Centurions a powerful anti-tank unit, they're also one of the best horde clearing units in the game. I've had games where these guys have popped off, and I managed to get them teleporting around the board, and every turn they kill a tank and a unit of infantry by themselves. Even without buffs, their ability allows them to reroll hits of 1 against anything, or reroll all hits if the target is on an objective. So they're insanely consistent rerolling their hits and wounds without having to use Oath of Moment, which you can then use elsewhere. But with Oath of Moment, they get +1 to wound, pushing these strength 9 missiles from anti-horde to anti-everything. And with the Vanguard Spearhead, you can give them +1 to hit as well, making them hit on 2s and give them an extra AP. Both versions of the Centurion are insanely fun to use because of how consistent and powerful they are. They can be a bit tricky to use, and you can get boxed in or leave them in a bad position or get caught up in melee, and a good player can play around them. However, the one constant, win or lose, is that my opponent fears the Centurion. They have to play around them. They have to think about them. And if they don't, they will get punished. 6 Sanguinary Guard and Dante hanging out a smidge? Gone. A Knight overstepped? Gone. Trying to get a transport full of guard onto an objective? Gone and gone. I love them. They are exactly my kind of unit. Tanky, disruptive, high damage, slow juggernauts. They're the kind of character I love to play in video games. I was a warrior main in World of Warcraft, then later a Death Knight main after a brief foray into Druid, but I guess even as a Boomkin, that counts as slow, high damage, disruptive juggernaut. And yes, I will always use the Boomkin form, because if you use this starry form, you were an absolute coward. Embrace the boom! When I played League of Legends, I main top lane because I hate myself, and played Poppy, Yorick, Cho'Gath, Trundle, Urgot, and other champions of that nature. High damage, tanky, disruptive front lines, because whilst I might hate myself so much that I was a top laner, I also hate you and want you to suffer and not get to play the game. I mean, we're top laners, we're used to not playing the game. In Bethesda games, I always start off as a heavy armored, big sword, swingy, smashy guy before inevitably becoming a stealth typer, as is the universal natural progression of every Skyrim character. So I love the way they look. I love their lore as these hulking exosuits piloted by already hulking armored superhumans. I love the way they play on the table. And seeing as I painted 18 of them in a variety of styles, I do in fact also love painting them. They're really easy to paint. There's a lot of metal on the frame that is a little bit tedious, but that's easy just to slap on some lead belcher and non-oil and get it done, then move on to the rest of the model, which is nice, flat pieces that aren't so big that they're difficult to fully cover with a few brushstrokes, like a tank, for example, but large enough not to have any issues with making mistakes. Their weapons look awesome and give a lot of different options how to approach them, and the trim is only really on the shoulders, and it's quite large, so it's quite forgiving. There's very little overlapping parts as they don't cross their guns over them, and in fact, very little areas that are difficult to access when fully assembled at all. They're a nice model if you want to practice edge highlighting, as there's a lot of clear edges and places such as the foot which can be easily covered by a tuft if you do it wrong. There aren't that many trinkets or baubles to worry about, and there's just so much potential, especially for the Screaming Ravens, where each unit is their own thing, usually based on some old video game, because I'm old and nostalgia for the good old days is the only thing that keeps me sane. I've themed my Centurions after Metroid Prime, Pokemon, Ocarina of Time, Majora's Mask, and Twilight Princess, and those last two I painted very quickly for a tournament with not much in the way of techniques beyond the basic battle ready stuff, and I think they actually came out really awesomely. I was expecting to go back to these later to finish them off, but honestly, they look fine as they are. This is something that I'm still struggling with. When is enough? When do I call a model done? Having that strict timeline was really useful in making me cut down to the basics, call it done, and then realize that the extra hours I spend trying to make a miniature really shine, extra highlights or layers, isn't really that necessary for what I'm aiming for here. Have I learned that lesson and applied it to my future painting work? Well, seeing as I haven't painted anything since painting these, I'm going to say no. Centurions mean so much to me. It's the model and unit that I consider my favorite in the entire game. It's the unit I've based my entire tournament list around to try and make something silly work. And it's the model I've used to express my creativity the most. It's the model that has allowed me to make these videos, inspire others to start this hobby. And it's become the model that bizarrely has become associated with me in general. Videos or threads about Centurions mention me in the comments a lot. And that is such a humbling thing to see. A friend of mine was browsing Reddit and she told me she had a weird experience seeing a random thread about Centurions, and the comments were all mentioning me. Awesomeness Tactics released a Centurion video, and almost all the comments were talking about me. And Christian Volkamian had to repeatedly tell people that just because his opponents had Centurions, they weren't me, before inexplicably calling me a boy failure despite being the one who lost at a tournament to his blind and incorrect hatred of Centurions. Take that, you vampiric bitch! And so, being the Centurion guy, I get asked one question more than any other. What will you do if Games Workshop sends Centurions to Legends? For those who don't know, Legends is the place that some units go when they are no longer supported. It's something like, say, Magic the Gathering or other card games. They're the sets that have been cycled out as new sets come in. These happen every so often. Either an older model unit is updated and the new one takes precedence, so the old one goes to Legends, or it's just an old, forgotten unit that doesn't really fit into the more modern game. Whatever reason it is. They're old and out of support. They still get rules, so they aren't fully unsupported in each new edition, but their models aren't sold anymore, or they're difficult to come by. Tournaments don't allow Legends, they're never updated during any sort of balance patch data slates. So your own personal games, you can allow Legends to play with them and do whatever you want, but as they aren't supported or balanced, they tend to either be over or underpowered and can skew things sometimes. And in most pickup games or local public friendly games, it's easier not to have to try and work around them or try and fit them in. It's a similar thing to everyone using the L-shaped ruins. Yes, you can do more with the terrain layouts, but rather than one person having a bad game or the game being unbalanced because you couldn't agree on the terrain or there's too many shooting lanes, it's easy to just have some basic rules to drop down some terrain on the table that just get you into the game. I could probably do an entire video on that topic, to be honest. So recently there have been increasingly more rumors that as Centurions are old and not well liked, that maybe the next edition of 40k, Games Workshop might decide they're not worth it anymore. Maybe they'll update them, but there is a chance that they go to Legends, meaning that they'll be more difficult to use for most public games and unusable in tournaments. If that happens, what do I do? And the answer, to be honest, is nothing. They get sent to the Legends Void. Oh well, I'll probably still use them in friendly games with my friends, or I'll probably still make custom rules to them in my Screaming Raven supplement. Probably still make some content about them, and I just would have to come up with something else to take to tournaments, I guess. I've got plenty of other things to do. I could branch out and maybe try and be the next Skari as Drukari, or get a PhD and finally understand how Thousand Suns work, or just get a whole flock of Storm Ravens. There's options for me, and honestly, going to Legends isn't the end of the world for the majority of players who just want to have a fun game, not really interested in the competitive scene, or just want to have a silly game of 40k. Centurions will still be there, and I'll still love them. And I'll still have a blast playing with my favorite and, in my opinion, the best unit in the entirety of the 40k universe. It's what I would say if I was a fucking bitch. What I would actually do is do what any rational person would do. Get in my car, drive to Nottingham, go to Warhammer World, and start a one-man protest outside the building to reinstate Centurions to their rightful place as front and center of the Codex, create a Centurion Lieutenant, and make the Screaming Ravens canon. Otherwise, I'll barge into their office, find the office of James Workshop himself, drop kick the door in, and then take every unsold box of Centurions and fucking shove them right up his ass. Let me know your favorite model and what war crimes you would commit to protect them. And as always, thank you very much for watching. If you enjoy this, go ahead and like and subscribe, all that good YouTube stuff. And if you want to help me stockpile supplies for my potential siege of Warhammer World, you can become a member or patron like all of these awesome people. Your support means the world to me and helps secure the future of this channel, as it has done for these past 100 videos, and gets you access to the super secret supporters club, where we are collectively trying to subtly make every unit in the game close to Centurions by playing specific units at tournaments and fixing the results, so Games Workshop nerfs and buffs units of our choosing until they all represent the perfect profile. All hail the Centurion. All hail the Centurion. All hail the Centurion.